We have been pressured by men for sex. Men keep asking, men isolate us. They get us a drink. They use guilt. They use their friends. They keep touching after women say no or pull away. They hear no and they think it's the beginning of the negotiation. And every time that women say this, there's some clown saying, well, are you sure that he knew? Are you sure that you really said no? Are you sure that he understood? Maybe she gave him mixed signals, right? Maybe it's just awkward communication. Are you sure? No. In this study, the men were anonymously asked about the strategies that they used to get sex from women they knew did not want sex and did not consent.
Are you serious?
So let's look at the study. The paper he shows is Isolate, Inebriate, Intimidate, Repeat by O'Sullivan and Ronis, published in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence in 2026. Here's how the study worked. 2,689 men aged 18 to 34 were surveyed through an online panel called Qualtrics. To be eligible, you had to identify as a man, be in that age range, and have had a sexual encounter with a woman in the past 2 years. That is the sample. Then the men were asked one main question. In the past 4 years, how many times have you used any of the following strategies to get or try to get a woman to have some type of sex when she didn't want to have sex or acted like she didn't want to have sex? Read it again. To get or try to get. So an attempt counts, even if no sex happened. And then when she didn't want to have sex or acted like she didn't want to have sex. So it includes cases where the woman actually didn't want it, but also cases where she just acted like she didn't want it. Now the men were given a list of 36 strategies and asked to mark how often they used each one. And here's the part that really matters. Those 36 strategies range from things that are clearly aggressive and predatory, like use drugs to help or threaten to hurt her, all the way to things that on the surface are much more ambiguous, like told her whatever she wanted to hear. Those are very different categories of behavior, and the study lumps them all into one list of 36. Now here's what Professor Neal did. Out of those 36 strategies, he cherry-picked the ones that, when paraphrased a certain way, paint men in the worst possible light. His third claim: 5 in 10 of us badgered the woman who said no until she changed her answer. He most likely got this from the strategy, ask her repeatedly to have sex. 48.6% of men in the survey reported having done this at least once in the past 4 years, so roughly 5 in 10. But hold on, Merriam-Webster dictionary defines badger as to harass or annoy persistently. Now, is that what ask her repeatedly to have sex means? It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Let me give you a real-world example. Imagine you met a woman at a bar. You hit it off, you're vibing, you're making out. You say, wanna come back to my place? She smiles and says, oh, you playboy, you think I will jump into your bed just like that? We don't know each other that well yet. Okay, you keep having a good time, the vibe is still good. 1 hour later you say, you sure you don't wanna come over? She smiles and says, okay. You go to your place and spend the night together. By the survey's wording, that would count. You basically asked her repeatedly to have sex, and she initially acted like she didn't want to. But is that badgering? Is that harassment? No, that is just how flirting works. Can the same item also capture genuine harassment, where a guy keeps pressuring a woman until she gives in just to make him stop? Yes, absolutely. And if it does, that is a horrible behavior and a real problem. But then there are other, much more specific items on the survey for that, like gradually pushed verbally or physically until you got what you wanted. So when Professor Neal takes the broad ask her repeatedly item and paraphrases it as badgered until she changed her answer, he is not just reporting the data, he is misrepresenting it. He is picking the most aggressive possible interpretation of an ambiguous item, ignoring the fact that the item itself includes everything from rejected flirting to actual harassment, and presenting it as if that is what the number means. 8 in 10 of us lie to convince a woman to sleep with us most likely comes from this strategy in the survey. Told her whatever she wanted to hear. 78.1% of men reported using this at least once, so roughly 8 in 10. Before I go into that strategy though, let me address a few elephants in the room. Professor Neal takes this 78.1% and applies it to us, to the general population of all men. But there are several problems with that I didn't talk enough about in the previous video. First, despite the sample here being larger than in the previous 2 studies, it is still quite restricted. 18 to 34 years old, mostly white Caucasian or black African origin, this is still far from being representative of all men. Second, the sample was pre-selected. Only men who had sex with a woman in the past 2 years were included. If you're a virgin or simply had a dry spell for 2 years, you are not in this study. Think about it this way. A study of gym goers cannot tell you about the exercise habits of all people. A study of car owners cannot tell you about the transportation habits of all people. And a study of sexually active men aged 18 to 34 cannot tell you about all men. By definition, a pre-selected sample cannot represent the group it excluded. Third, the study itself shows that not every attempt ended in sex. For the strategy, told her whatever she wanted to hear, 23.9% of cases resulted in no intercourse at all. So even on its own terms, you cannot use the 8 in 10 figure for a phrase like convince a woman to sleep with us, because almost a quarter of the time, no sleeping happened. Now let's go to the strategy itself. Told her whatever she wanted to hear, the phrase from the survey, and lie to convince a woman to sleep with us, the claim made by Professor Neil, are not the same thing, not even close. And a professor of English should really know that. Let me give you an example. A woman asks you if she looks pretty tonight. You say yes. That is telling her what she wants to hear. And if you find her attractive, which is the entire reason you are flirting with her, it is also the truth. Is that a lie? No. Is that you manipulating her into bed? Not necessarily. That is just a normal human interaction. Now, can told her whatever she wanted to hear also include actual lying and manipulation, like promising things you have no intention of fulfilling or making up a whole personality just to get her home? Yes, of course it can. And that kind of behavior could be genuinely problematic. But the survey item lumps all of that together. And again, our professor takes that number, picks the worst possible interpretation, and announces that 8 in 10 of us lied to a woman to convince her to sleep with us. And I hope now you can see just how many layers of blatant misrepresentation it has.